She is our residential foreclosure expert. So, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't stand behind tables well. So welcome. Let me ask you, how many here in the room are directly dealing with the foreclosure or have a very good friend or a family member who's going through it? Let me see a show of hands. Oh, okay, so a number of you are experiencing the nightmare. And if you aren't or don't have somebody who is, you will be soon. Okay, so,
How many are about to do that?
well, yeah, that's the will be soon. Okay, I'm going to thank you for the work Bob did, because that's a foundational where I'm going to take it, and I didn't know that Bob was going to be here talking about that, so that was great. How many of you feel a little bit overwhelmed by what he was talking about? Let me see a show of hands. Okay? Okay, I'm going to take you to a new level of overwhelm, but I'm going to try and keep it real user-friendly at a layman's language, which becomes sometimes challenging. First off, I'll just say who we are at Good Grief America. We are a nonprofit organization founded in Oregon that deals with foreclosures and deals with education, research, referral, and solutions. We have stopped thousands of foreclosures in the state. We have hundreds and hundreds of homes in limbo in the state, many of them in Southern Oregon, where the banks can't foreclose and they can't collect unless they come forward, and they're not. Many of those homes now, we're having people after the sale that we've kept in their home. Our longest standing family in their home after the sale is 3 years, and the bank has permanently disappeared as far as we can tell. So the family's decided, I guess we will just raise our family here. This thing is a mess. I'm going to talk about a few pieces that Bob did not go into that I think are really, really key. And Bob said, you know, he wasn't sure that wasn't his expertise. Unfortunately, it has become some of our expertise. These are things. Remember when you were a child and you were growing up and people said, what do you want to be when you grow up? Never was an expertise on this information on my list. But here we are. And the more we understand as a culture and as individuals, the more we can take and make a difference in this situation. So I want to thank you for coming to the table and being part of the solution. 6 million people have gone down in the last 4 years on foreclosure. Another 4 million are in the process right now, and we aren't even halfway through it. They're estimating 25 million. Here's the problem with that number. As we get more into the snake's belly, the number gets bigger, because the more foreclosures go down, it creates more that it should never have created. And we don't have 2 hours to go into that, but it is a nightmare. I don't know how many. I'm trying to get the numbers on how many homes there are with loans on them in America. I'm getting that there are about 90 million. Do you know, Bob?
Actually, the latest things I found were, I think in 2008, there's 80 million homes, 27 million of them are free and clear, which is wonderful. Those people took a hit on the value, but it didn't hurt us. But 53 million with...
Okay, 53 million with loans on it. And I think the numbers I had also had some like rental properties, like fourplexes and such. So even if you had, so if you have 50 million or so, and 25 million are slated for foreclosure, what are the numbers? I talk to people who say, well, it really doesn't affect me. Oh, really?
Yeah.
This is affecting all of us. Max Gardner, who we just sent our lead attorney and lead researcher back to New York to take a 2-day training for Max Gardner, who is a bankruptcy attorney who specializes in foreclosure defense, has a whole list of things he says that we're going to see in 2012. And he's been right on, and his numbers make sense with all the other research I did. So I'm going to read you just a couple of those statistics. He says home values. Home values will continue to decline during 2012, and I do not expect the bottom of the real estate market to be reached until the third quarter of 2014. So do we have any realtors here in the room that are actively selling property? Okay, don't raise your hand. Shame on you. My husband and I, Mark's in the back of the room, are licensed realtors. We are not actively working in this nightmare snake pit. We've kept our licenses for a couple of reasons. We are not attorneys, but as long as we're licensed, we can talk about real estate law. We don't give legal advice. So, third quarter of 2014, we're still sinking. Jackson County is sinking 17 to 21% a year and has been doing so for the last 4 years. What's happening with our values? Our house on Old Stage Road was comping out at $900,000 in 08. Today, about 3 months ago, I did a comp out on it, $310,000.
Wow.
Yeah, we had 4,000 $400,000 plus worth of equity, we are underwater today. This is what's going on. I talk to people all the time. They go, it's not affecting me. I go, really? What's going on with your property? You know, what's in your wallet? You know? Okay, Max goes on to say, my best guess for any type of sustained recovery in the housing market is no sooner than the third quarter of 2021. That's about 10 years off.
Would you repeat that?
2021.
The whole state.
The whole real estate
No,
industry.
you- okay.
Okay? So, and our economy nationwide is based on the real estate market. So when they tell us the economy is turning around and improving, my favorite line is, we may be headed for a double dip. How can we double dip when we haven't pulled out of the last dip? So, you know, these are questions for me. Now, I'm talking, right now I'm backing you up to the hearse and making you smell the roses. I really have a positive attitude about the outcome, but we have got to look at what's going on first and be real about it and not be in denial. He goes on to say, I do not expect to see any real recovery in the housing until at least 2022. A massive number of bank-owned homes, those are called REOs, will be turned into rental properties by the banks and or mortgage servicers and will be sold in bulk sales to investors for the same purpose. So we're going back to those numbers that Bob talked about, you know, back in the 1920s where maybe 1 in 6 owned a home. So we have the wealth siphoning back up to the top 1% faster than any of us can keep track of. And that's exactly the process we're in. We have on our website a whole list of books. And one of my lines in life is ignorance is not bliss. The more we know, the more empowered we are to make a decision. We have a number of books you can read if you want to understand this issue. But I'm going to read to you just a couple lines out of Griftopia by Matt Taibbi. If you haven't read his works, it is fabulous. He's funny, has a little bit of a potty mouth, but you know, in this market, I think sometimes those words are applicable. Okay, he said, with the $13+ trillion we are estimated to ultimately spend on the bailouts, $13+ trillion, this is what was estimated, we could not only have bought off and paid for every subprime mortgage in the country. That would have been $1.4 trillion. We could have paid off every mortgage in the country and still had enough money to buy a home for every adult American who didn't have one. Instead, that money's being siphoned to the top, they're taking the homes, and we're being left in worse poverty than ever. And we had a $7 billion bailout that happened, remember, who was it, Bernanke running up the steps, or? Paulson. Our pal Paulson. Yes, ran up the steps, had a 3-page solution, said you got to sign it, don't ask questions, 700 billion, it's not a problem. He made it and everybody thought, oh my God, that's so horrible. At the same time, nobody was looking at the Federal Reserve, there was a $7.7 trillion bailout made to the same rat bastards. And they got that money at 0.001%. And then they turned around and created bonds with our government and sold it back, those bonds to them for 3% and made a killing. There was a total of about 16 trillion that were siphoned out in that went to monies all over the world, including some of the bankers' wives got big loans for 0.001% to open their boutique businesses. And we don't have time to tell all that story, but I can tell you the Federal Reserve did a bailout bigger than anything, bigger than Matt Taibbi was talking about with this 13 trillion. And where were we? Where did this money go? Did it fix our problem? Did it put, you know, probably one of the best ways to stimulate the economy is everybody's mortgages was wiped out. How much money would they have to just go shopping? Okay, so Matt Taibbi is just brilliant. I can't say enough about him. He uses an analogy. He calls the Wall Street elite players a giant vampire squid that wrapped its tentacles around the face of humanity and jammed its blood funnel into anything that smelled like money. So when you start to realize, yes, as Bob put it, we all played a part. I have an ebook coming out, and I pound heavily, we all played a part. But regardless of who's at fault, it's us that has to undo it because the squid will not quit sucking. We have to take responsibility and start doing something today, and I'm going to wrap up with a couple of ideas once I go through a few more facts. But on what we can do. But the squid orchestrated it. And the squid was like a highly addicted machine, and they knew that they could not pull off this giant casino unless they got us all addicted too. And we had an administration the last 10 years that said, just go shopping, I'm an optimist. We're the greatest country in the world. They got us addicted. It is time for us to quit being the co-addicts of this addiction. And we need to say no to these issues. And there are things, we have power. We are the 99%. One of the things that when Capitalism, a Love Story came out, Michael Moore was touring the country. And he got asked, you know, on his different interviews, a number of questions. And he said at one point that I heard, he says, I had a top Wall Street banker, I said to him. I said, there are a lot of them and a few of you guys. Aren't you worried about that? And the banker said, we're not too worried about the sheeple.
Oh, really?
Our only concern is if they ever get organized. So welcome to the party, and thank you for being part of the solution.
Make them scared.
So why are the foreclosures going on? This is what we come back down to. Why? And I'm going to give you a couple of facts and some fun things to look at. Why do these foreclosures go down? If 13 trillion could have cleaned it up, why do these keep going down? Does anybody have an idea?
They make more money when they foreclose.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, I was going to back that up. With the
Okay,
loan service.
can I use this board to go over a couple numbers and scoot you guys a little bit? I'm just going to erase a little bit here, and I hope I don't take away anything really important. I'm going to go over a couple of numbers and how the numbers work. Okay, this whole machine, this giant sucking squid, was done by design. It was very profitable on the way up, and it's even more profitable on the way down. And when we start to understand that is when we start to get a grip on what we can do to stop the machine. So what I'll give you an example, and one of the things Bob didn't say, that he talked about that great big pool of money that they pulled from to fund these loans. He talked about Fannie and Freddie, and there were a lot of players on Wall Street. When they went to that pool to get money, they did not take the face amount out of the pool. And this is something really important to understand. They took anywhere from 1.5 to 3 times the face amount. And so, for example, a $320,000 loan, if it was one of those adjustable rate mortgages, they could have siphoned up to $1 million. That's the first big suck. That's the small stuff, though. This is why one of the reasons we're not seeing modifications. Number one, the loan servicers don't own the loans. In fact, it's dubious if anybody owns these loans, the more we dig into them. And number two, if they were going to take and modify that loan, they have to buy it out of the stinking pool. Are they going to pay $1 million or $320 to cram it down to 180? Neither. So we got to understand the math behind this. And also, it's been documented and proven how these servicers make money. It is 46% more profitable to foreclose than have a performing loan. And what that means is if this gal lives right next door to this gal, they have the same loan, the same home, and you're not paying and you are, your loan will be more profitable to them when they foreclose than yours as you pay. So what is
that's counterintuitive.
Okay, that's in the workbook, and we don't have enough time, or in the workshops and in the ebook I'm working on, and I don't have time to go into it, but I can tell you, this is without the credit default swaps. Highly profitable. Now you start layering in something like called credit default swaps. So if they pulled $1 million out of the pool, they funded a $320,000 loan, $680,000 was left that was sitting in their pocket, and they were originating these. Countrywide was making these, like pumping out taffy. It was unbelievable. So if you have $680,000 left, they put some of it in the pool to make payments that weren't going to be made because they knew these things were going belly up. That's called a Ponzi. when you start paying the investor with their own money. They also took some of that money and they bought credit default swaps. Those things were not even insurance policies. They were sold as insurance policies. They're unregulated. There were no reserves. This is what crushed our economy. And the estimates right now, and the numbers keep going up, is that there's about $180 trillion worth of it. Because you think the $14 trillion we owe on our government is bad? This is what's coming at us. And this is why this debt has to be written down and these credit default swaps have to be stopped. And that's going to be the key to our survival. So what we have here is they took some of this money and they would buy up to 30 times the face amount. So if you had a $320,000 loan and you 30 times it, what's that? 9, 10 million?
Yeah.
So you got a $1 million casino on the front end, up to 10 million on the back end, if they can get you foreclosed. So what do you think they're going to do? Do you think they want the performing loan or the non-performing loan?
Non-performing.
And we're not talking about the masses, we're talking about the 1%. They know exactly what's going on. They have bought our government, enough of them, to keep these pieces in place. So it's not just mortgages that's happening with this. Your student debt, your visas, your car loans, every piece of debt. We have got a debt bubble out there that's breaking every place. And the top 1% are making a fortune off of it. So that's the bad news. The good news is we can quit participating in our own demise. And I'll give you a couple ideas and then open it up to some questions. The first thing that everybody in this room can do, if you haven't done already, and we have some literature in the back, first thing is move your money out of these big banks because they are so heavily leveraged. The leveraging Bob talks about, this all plays into it. And if we had 3 or 4 hours, we could go into it in more depth and show you until you could really wrap your head around the squid and start biting it. But that's what the leverage is all based on. And these players on Wall Street who did it used none of their own money. They used the money that you put in their banks. Our local banks and our credit unions are not, they cannot participate in this mess. They don't have the ability to participate in this casino. Put your money on Main Street so it recirculates it. Get it out of those banks. Another thing is get out of debt. A lot of us just said, when the market hit and crashed and we had our 800 credit scores that went down the toilet, it's like, whatever. And we quit paying it, and I went in and liquidated a bunch of our debt for 8 cents on the dollar and got rid of them. And I'm no longer participating with them. You have to decide where you stay in it, but there's a lot of ways you can quit participating in our demise. So I think with this, if you can see the same formula is going on with your student loans, your visas, and when you go belly up and quit paying, they cash in big. They do not lose. And this thing is criminal and it's wrong. And we've got to find sustainable ways to work around it, keep our money local, where we shop, where we bank, what we buy. Go ahead, question.
As a 22-year-old, what can I do to help with this crisis? Because I haven't been able to play the game. And so, I don't have any pieces.
We
so
have
what
a
do I
virgin
do?
in the room.
Yeah, I've been sitting here for about a year now and doing research on this, but I didn't have anything to do with it. So my question is what does a 22-year-old, aspiring activist, what does he do?
Okay, do you have money in a bank at all, even $100?
No, I took it out a long time ago.
Okay, that's the first thing you can do. Now, sometimes it's worth having money in a local bank. And I'm not going to go into a lot about what kind of money and how much and where in this meeting to put it. We have more of it in the ebook. We have a 5-hour workshop we did that I finally put on an ebook because I couldn't keep doing the workshops. And, we can't do it in 20 minutes. I would say, look where you shop. Look what you buy. How much unnecessary plastic toxic waste from China are we consuming? We have become human ownings, human consumings instead of human beings in this culture. I grew up in Northern California, rural California, population 35, no electricity, no running water. We didn't consume much. And I went to one-room schools, and now I live in the big world. But we don't. What I know is we consume far more than we need. We need to have a culture and a society and economy that does not base on massive consumption. How many of you saw the Coneheads? What was it? They would say massive consumption of, mass quantities of whatever they were consuming. They were observing Americans. It was kind of obnoxious. So, a study in that, how to create a sustainable economy you and your children can develop and build in. And there's a lot of work coming out on that. Okay, great. Any